Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you hear me, Sir Munhib?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Sir Munhib.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so let me just fix my voice here. Okay, let me introduce our speaker first. I am directed very strictly that I should not go beyond anything while introducing him, so it will be just short. He is my mentor and he taught us romantic poetry back in 2018 in our BS. And it's an honor for me to introduce him to my students. And secondly, he did his bachelor's from International Islamic University. He did his master's from there. And now he's doing PhD from there as well. So he'll be sharing his opinions and his feelings and his experience regarding research and yeah, how to be authentic in and also keep the theory alongside. So these all ideas will be the topic of today's discussion. And so let's welcome him together. So over to you, Sir Monheb.
Assalamu alaikum. So, before I start my sinus, I apologize for that. Now, as far as research is concerned, बीच में थोड़ी सी आपकी आवाज बंद हो गई थी, so I assume you just talked about the topic. Maybe कोई signal का issue था मेरी तरफ, I don't know. मेरी आवाज सही आ रही है?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. So, yeah, so about research and generally speaking, how I feel about research and how we can hunt for topics. Ideally speaking, research is curiosity. ठीक है ना? हमारे यहाँ research is a bit different. I mean, unfortunately, I actually even heard or read, I forget the exact, a Harvard guy the other day complaining about how a lot of research is now about the number of publications that you have. And the problem with that is people often pick one or two areas that they are comfortable with, and they just keep repeating what they've done with different novels and different texts. So it becomes eventually turning out papers every other day. Magar, in its essence, research is curiosity. And one of my problems and one of the problems with Saud Bay is we've tried to, and we are still trying to keep it that way. When you are looking for a topic, the main point is there should be something that makes you think, okay, what is this and why is it, right? Now, and the reason is, if you're just applying a theory onto a text, then I mean, anyone could do that. I mean, okay, maybe it might help, maybe it is research, but as far as research is concerned, the first principle is curiosity, and then the second principle is procedure. Okay? And without the part of curiosity, what you often end up with is a couple of problems. The first is you can end up doing what everyone is doing, regardless of whether you're interested in it or not. Number two, you might you might end up taking the space of someone who might have been curious for real. And the third problem is then you are often biased towards a certain thing that you're trying to prove because you are already directed by a certain perspective. So the thing about curiosity is, in its essence, you should be willing to engage in research regardless of whether you like the outcome or not. So you try to prove something and it gets disproved. If you are really trying to do research, you should basically have the guts to say, okay, I conducted this study and the results are that what I thought would be proven has been disproven. And then, there is no end to it, because obviously then check okay, why did it work out, and so on and so forth. So that's the way I basically see research, as curiosity. And the problem, I think, with the academy nowadays is that research is, instead of being curiosity, it is being treated as basically a chore, right? Everyone has to produce 2 papers every year and so on. Now, the purpose of research in the degree is that you get to practice what it is, so that when the time comes and you are going to do your actual research, you've already had an experience of it, and that you've engaged with what it means to look for answers. So then the question is, chale, it's curiosity, theek hai, and we don't want it to become just the production of papers, but how do we do it? I mean, in literature, the first thing you do is read. Magar, while you're reading, you need to learn to notice. And what you need, as far as research is concerned, what you need to notice is questions. Agar aap writing ki baat karte, because I mean, Saud knows I lean more towards writing than towards research. But if we talk about writing, then we would notice things like character constructions and writing style and adjectives kaise use kiye and stuff like that. And we do that a lot. I mean, one exercise a lot of writers recommend is, interestingly enough, that while you're reading a good novel that you like, start writing some bits of it into your diary. And there are many reasons why I say that, but again, that is for a different class or a different session or whatever. In research, you want to be noting down questions that come into your mind, or you want to note down observations that come to your mind. So sometimes you're like, okay, why is this in this way? And sometimes the question is not, okay, aisa kyun hai? It's more like, okay, this is annoying, or okay, this is interesting, and I want people to know about it. So for example, इस वक्त when I did my MPhil, originally I was planning to do something in children's literature, but I actually ended up doing it on popular fiction. More specifically, I did it on Islamic fiction, which is a branch of popular fiction that has to do with themes and ideas related to the mostly the medieval Islamic, but also the later Islamic civilization. And one of the reasons I did it was actually I read two novels on Rumi, and I was like, this is historically absolutely useless, right? I have this view on historical novels that while they are, okay, fiction, they do have some responsibility of conducting some historical research taken. So that study came from wanting to inform, but sometimes studies come from wanting to know. So for example, right now there is a study I'm considering, which is basically along the lines of, okay, if I look into this and I do this, this, and this, what would happen, right? And what will I learn? So in this case, this is exploratory. I have no idea what's going to happen, but in that case, I kind of know what I'm saying. Magar uske andar bhi, you have to make sure you do two things to avoid it becoming simply you proving what you already think you know, or you forcing your conclusions onto the novel. The first of which is you need to be curious and open enough that if your study or your conclusion or your observation is disproven in the long run, you are willing to take it back, or you are willing to admit that it was wrong. And number two, based on that, you're willing to change your research questions. Now, there is a reason I say the second part, because unfortunately, in literature, the trend is not to say, okay, I had these research questions, this is what I tried to prove, and when I studied the novel, it turned out to be completely different. So usually what they do is they change their research questions according to the new observation, to their new observations. So that's why I said that. So, but okay, ये तो हो गया कि आपने observation की है. You have an observation, you observed something. What do you do then? The next thing is you reduce it to a bunch of basic either statements or hypotheses you're trying to prove, or a bunch of questions that you're trying to answer. ठीक है ना? And एक चीज इनमें रखें, your answers need not stay the same until the end. They will, in fact, they will change. It's not that they might change, they will change. There is no such thing as research that stays the same until the very end. So the first thing you do is you note down questions, ठीक है ना? And you note down observations, and then you narrow them down to the most important things that you think need to be proven or which need to be answered in order to figure out the answer to your main observation, the proving or disproving of your observation, or the answering of your questions, ठीक है ना? Those questions need to be related to an overarching theme or overarching idea, which is your original major observation or your original major question. ठीक है ना? अब इस सारी की एक चीज नोट करें. the way I'm describing research is not saying कि okay आपने decide किया. I have a friend, so I'm not going to name him or anything, but one time we had this assignment and he was like, okay, I'm going to conduct a falana analysis of falana novel. Let's just say कि उसने post colonialism का था, ठीक है? And I'm not going to tell you exactly what he was planning because anyways. So let's say उसने कहा मैं falana novel का post colonial analysis करूँगा. And what I asked him was, did you read that novel? And he said, no. So I said, how do you know you're supposed to do a post-colonial analysis? And he said, कोई character मिल जाएगा ना जो उस पे fit हो जाएगा, फिर मैं लगा दूंगा. And the point is, that's what you're not supposed to do. On the other hand, what you're supposed to do is कि while you're reading the novel, आप questions पूछ रहे हैं, and then when you're rereading the novel and when you're reading theoretical material, that is going to help you conduct analysis. साथ साथ में you're asking questions and you're modifying your observations. ठीक है ना? This is main thing you need to differentiate between, right? The first approach is that you have an idea कि आपने क्या करना है and you're just forcing it onto the text. The second is you're modifying things as you go along, right? Sometimes you will find out कि मिसाल के तौर पे you're studying 3 novels, उनमें से आपने 2 पढ़े थे, let's say, and then you came up with 3 research questions, and then you answered those, and then you added 2 more novels, let's say, अपनी study में, and you studied them, and turns out these 2 novels only deal with the first 2 research questions. They don't deal with the third. So you can simply, instead of trying to force it into it, what you should do is basically you say that in these 2 novels ये 2 answer होते हैं and this is what you have about these, और ये एक question answer नहीं होता, and these are the implications of this one question not getting answered, right? So in other words, you're supposed to be open to the text. ठीक है ना? The text is what you are studying. The theory is not what you're studying. The theory is just helping material. And the problem with a lot of people is that what they're doing is they're taking theory, usko पढ़ रहे हैं, and the novel is just a kind of an example, yeah, to show कि हाँ ये इस पे भी apply होती है, which is, I mean, kind of boring. So अब आपने क्या किया? You read the novel, you listed your observations or questions, you read the novel again, ठीक है ना? हमेशा एक चीज में रखें, एक प्रिलिमिनरी एनालिसिस लिटरेचर में होता है, बाद में आपका वो एक्चुअल आता है. नाउ व्हाट यू डू इज यू स्टार्ट रीडिंग मटेरियल दैट इज थ्योरेटिकली रिलेवेंट. ठीक है ना? मिसाल के तौर पे, बिकॉज आई वाज स्टडीइंग नॉवेल्स ऑन रूमी, आई स्टार्टेड रिसर्चिंग ऑन रूमीज लाइफ. ठीक है ना? मैंने फ्रैंकलिन ल्यूइस की किताब पढ़ी, व्हिच इज आई मीन अ रिडिकुलसली ह्यूज बुक, बट इट्स वेरी यूजफुल. ठीक है ना? देन आई गॉट द ओरिजिनल टेक्स्ट जो फारसी में है सारे. ठीक है ना? I got translations, I compared translations, I studied the reviews of translations. उसके अलावा histories of Western studies on Rumi, histories of Western studies on tasawwuf, इस type की चीजें, right? So this is all theoretical material that is relevant. अब इस सारे के अंदर क्या है कि while you are reading material that is theoretically relevant, over time you will find more stuff. पहली चीज तो ये ज़हन में रखें, there is not going to be a simple pathway कि अच्छा मैंने नॉवल पढ़ ली है, अब मैं ये पढ़ लूंगा और फिर मैं लिख लूंगा and I'm done. ठीक है ना? Most probably जब आप अपनी रिसर्च कर लेंगे and you've written it, 2 साल बाद आप वापस आएंगे, you'll be like मैंने ये लिखा था. ठीक है ना? So the main point is, सबसे पहले आपने क्या किया? You read the novel, you came up with preliminary conclusions. You read the novel again, you kind of finalized your research questions. फिर आपने क्या किया? You start looking at relevant theoretical material, and while you're looking at relevant theoretical material, आपने उससे नोट करना शुरू किया कि क्या चीज मुझसे relevant है और क्या चीज जगह है जहां पर philosophically मैं इससे disagree करता हूँ और क्यों करता हूँ. उसके लिए अक्सर you need another reference. ठीक है ना? मिसाल के तौर पे किसी ने कोई conclusion बयान की, let's say about society, and apparently let's say that is a bit outdated, and a more recent, let's say, study in psychology या sociology, जिसको फिर अब आप लाके उसको फर्दर फिर मॉडिफाई कर सकते हैं उसके ओपिनियन को. सो यू डोंट नीड टू फॉलो ब्लाइंडली व्हाटएवर थ्योरेटिकल मॉडल यू आर रीडिंग. यू कैन एक्चुअली मॉडिफाई दैट थ्योरेटिकल मॉडल ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ अदर रिसर्च दैट यू हैव कंडक्टेड, बिकॉज एट द एंड ऑफ द डे every researcher who has published before you is still human and is not omniscient. ठीक है ना? सो यहाँ तक अब क्या है कि आप रीडिंग ही करते हैं. और एक चीज में लिटरेचर के अंदर द प्रॉब्लम इज कि इट्स ऑल रीडिंग एंड देयर इज नो वे आउट ऑफ इट, अनलाइक अदर फील्ड्स. ठीक है ना? यहाँ पे एक्सपेरिमेंट्स नहीं होते. सो यू आर probably going to have a bibliography that is almost as long as your research article. Okay, not exactly, मगर अब उसके अंदर मेन चीज क्या है? How do you know कि when it's enough, ठीक है ना, because a lot of times you either end up doing too little research or too much research, ठीक है ना. Generally speaking, for small essays, research essays, yeah, small articles, they say okay, you should have at least 2 references for each major point that you are not that is not originally your point, ठीक है ना. यानी मिसाल के तौर पे अगर आपका जो ओरिजिनल एनालिसिस है उसमें तो ऑब्वियसली आप प्योरली टेक्स्ट को डिस्कस करेंगे और अपनी कंक्लूजन्स को, और ज्यादा से ज्यादा कोई अगर चीज आपने क्रॉस रेफरेंस करनी है कोई बात साबित करने के लिए तो फिर आप बुलाएंगे कि मिसाल के तौर पे व्हेन आई वाज टॉकिंग अबाउट लेट्स से नॉवेल्स ऑन रूमी, सो एक मैंने 4 नॉवेल्स किए थे, तो हर नॉवेल को डिस्कस करते हुए आई माइट ब्रिंग इन रेलेवेंट चैप्टर्स फ्रॉम हिस्ट्री ड्यूरिंग द एनालिसिस. मगर उसके अंदर in order to prove that something happened in history, I would have to bring either one very good reference or one or two good, at least 2 good references. I would have more than 2 references usually, unless आप original source को direct quote करें. In this case, मिसाल के तौर पे biography is written by Rumi's son and one of his students, ठीक है ना, तो मिसाल के तौर पे if I can bring those in, then I don't need 2 references. मगर the point is either you get the original source जिसको आप reference कर रहे हैं, or you get, अगर आप कोई जनरल पॉइंट बना रहे हैं, एटलीस्ट 2 references if it's very important, and if it's a side point उतना important नहीं है, एटलीस्ट 1 good reference, but you can have more depending on the amount of reading that you have done. मगर in the initial stages, क्योंकि अभी हम टॉपिक ढूंढने की बात कर रहे हैं, we're not talking about the entire study, हम थोड़ा सा आगे चले गए इस प्रोसीजर के अंदर अभी. So let's just backtrack a little. So you read the novel, you come up with questions, ठीक है ना. समटाइम्स आपके जहन में पहले से क्वेश्चन होता है हल्का फुल्का, मगर व्हेन यू आर रीडिंग फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम, ट्राई टू रीड इट ब्लाइंडली, ठीक है ना, ताकि यू हैव मोर इंटरेस्टिंग क्वेश्चंस. देन उन क्वेश्चंस को जहन में रखते हुए रीड द नॉवल वन मोर टाइम, या एटलीस्ट स्किम थ्रू इट, क्योंकि लेट्स से टाइम बहुत ज्यादा नहीं होता अक्सर, एंड दैट इज अ प्रॉब्लम. But after that, form your preliminary conclusions, do some relevant theoretical reading. इस स्टेज पे especially and especially I mean अगर आपने इसी कोर्स के अंदर करना है, which is 3 months and you have other courses as well, so it won't be that easy. So one approach is कि मिसाल के तौर पे trying to read all of Freud, what you can read is a good book on Freud for starters, and then find good extracts of Freud. जैसा आप you can find books called The Essential Freud, yeah, so on and so forth, ठीक है ना. Ideally you would have the time to read जो भी आप theoretical material पढ़ें directly, मगर you should read it well enough or read about it well enough कि you know actually कि Freud ने क्या कहा था, and also you know the criticisms of Freud to some extent, ठीक है ना, क्योंकि if you know only one perspective you end up usually believing it is true. So that is why मिसाल के तौर पे every time I teach literary theory, हर theory के लिए I actually also teach the opposite of that theory, right? So if you have Marxism, you have anarchism, you have libertarianism, and so on and so forth, ठीक है ना. So you want to also know the criticisms, that because that might tell you about other places where you can look अगर आप कोई psychological analysis कर रहे हैं, and that might actually help you find more interesting perspectives that make more sense than let's say जो हर कोई quote कर रहा है. So आपने preliminarily क्या करना है? Read the novel, number 1. Number 2, form questions. Number 3, read the novel again. And number 4, read some relevant theoretical material and conduct a preliminary analysis. उसकी base पे then you will basically write what is called a research proposal. A research proposal is basically saying, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to do it, and this is why it is important. So मिसाल के तौर पे you can actually just write 2 pages and that's enough, ठीक है ना. I once did write a 2-page research proposal. उसके अंदर क्या होता है, आप सिंपली हल्का सा बैकग्राउंड देते हैं कि ये बैकग्राउंड है, ये मैंने काम करना है, और मिसाल इन 1 पैराग्राफ, देन आप अगले 2-3 पैराग्राफ्स में अपनी हल्की फुल्की जस्टिफिकेशन, हल्का फुल्का एनालिसिस, हल्के फुल्के रेफरेंसेस देते हैं, और फिर उसके बाद आप अपने रिसर्च क्वेश्चंस पेश करते हैं और उनको जस्टिफाई करते हैं, ठीक है ना. मगर आमतौर पे ये भी ध्यान में रखें कि कुछ यूनिवर्सिटीज में पाकिस्तान के अंदर दे हैव अ लार्जर प्रपोजल का आइडिया. सो उसके अंदर क्या होता है, यू एक्चुअली राइट 5-6 पेजेस और उसमें हेडिंग्स होती हैं. सो उस केस में इन द इंट्रोडक्शन यू गिव अ बिट ऑफ अ बैकग्राउंड एंड सम व्यू. उसके बाद एक हेडिंग के अंदर आप अपने मेन पॉइंट्स, अपने रिसर्च क्वेश्चंस और अपनी जस्टिफिकेशन देते हैं, और हल्का और एक प्रिलिमिनरी मिनी एनालिसिस साथ में देते हैं टू शो कि आपने उस पर थोड़ा बहुत सोचा हुआ है. एंड वंस यू आर डन विद दैट, फिर बेसिकली ये होता है कि आपने देखना तो मेरे पास कितना टाइम है और उसके अंदर मैंने कितना काम करना है. सो अगेन लाइक आई सेड, आपने you don't want to end up doing too much research, so what you want to do is have at least 2 good references for every point you make, unless you're citing the original source. and for every side point that is, halka sa footnotes pe kahin hai, yeah, it's just that you kind of strengthen your main point, uske liye have at least one good reference for it, theek hai na. And I mean, frankly speaking, there are better people than me jo ye discussion aapke sath kar sakte hain, but I think that is all from my side, and again we can discuss different things. And so back to you.
Thank you so much. That was really a healthy discussion, and a lot of insights, starting from curiosity, and then why is it happening, and why this, and what is this, and then this is annoying and interesting, and why, knowing about why is it annoying and interesting, and then changing your research questions according to your new observations, and alongside while you're reading, I mean, modifying your questions and your own thesis statement. This all happens and presented so naturally by you. I really am very thankful to you. I think we should move towards the question answer session, and the school is open for the participants to ask questions. Students and my mates, ask as much as you can, because this is the opportunity, and we are in the preliminary phase of our research. So this is the first baby step for us to, step into the research. So I want you to ask whatever you want. If you don't have any question, then ask the questions that you ask yourself while you worry about the research. By the discussion, through the debate over them, and through the contemplation over them, we will, learn something. So I encourage all of you to ask something. The school is open for you. Also, you can type the question into the chat box as well.
Ideally, how many research questions should we address in our thesis? I've seen people work with just one research question as well, magar in a thesis, BS level pe, they generally expect at least two, and ideally they expect three. It can also vary more specifically according to the rules of your university, but generally speaking, they expect two or at least three, because they say that if you have just one research question, that could just be a simple article. So if for a thesis they expect कि 2 or 3 honge, so then there will be a certain amount of complexity. ठीक है ना?
Yeah, exactly. I would like to add one more thing, that having multiple questions makes it easy for you to have multiple chapters. So yeah,
Yeah, it also breaks down your analysis.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So मिसाल के तौर पे, let me share जिस वक्त मैंने अपना थीसिस लिखा था ना, so originally I did not know what my research questions were, तो मैंने actually proposal में जो मुझे उस टाइम पे समझ आई थी उसके हिसाब से मैंने ड्राफ्ट कर दिए थे. बाद में I radically changed a lot of my procedures and my arguments and my stuff. मगर based on what I had read so far, they were good research questions. जो final मेरे research questions थे, ठीक है ना? My original research question in my original research questions, me one, ठीक है ना? In the final version, the first one had to do with the way they were presented in life. The second one had to do with the relationship as it was presented, and the third one had to do with their philosophy and specifically on their conceptions of love. ठीक है ना? Now, spoiler alert. When one of the novels got quite close, but none of them actually seemed like the authors did actual research. मगर the main point was कि उसका फायदा ये हुआ था कि with each novel, क्योंकि आपको पता है कि जो आपका chapter है, it's structurally like an article, and articles are like like 2 or 3 essays matched together, right? When I was going to write about every novel, and most people would have structured this कि एक चैप्टर होता है एक रिसर्च क्वेश्चन पे, और उसके अंदर सारे नॉवेल्स डिस्कस होते हैं, फिर अगला चैप्टर पे उस पे सारे नॉवेल्स डिस्कस होते हैं. आई एक्चुअली अरेंज्ड इट अकॉर्डिंग टू पेयरिंग्स ऑफ नॉवेल्स. 2 नॉवेल्स थे जिनमें फ्रेम नैरेटिव था, 2 नॉवेल्स थे जिनमें नहीं था, तो एक चैप्टर में वो 2 नॉवेल्स थे, एक चैप्टर में 2 नॉवेल्स थे. एंड सो व्हाट आई डिड विद दैट वाज कि हर नॉवल की डिस्कशन के अंदर मैं बारी बारी उसको मैंने अरेंज कर दिया था अकॉर्डिंग टू द रिसर्च क्वेश्चंस, और फिर आखिर में अपने कंक्लूजन में मैंने रिसर्च क्वेश्चन वाइज उन चीज़ों को रिइटरेट किया था समराइज करके। मगर यह है कि आप जो भी इनमें से प्रोसीजर फॉलो करें, योर रिसर्च क्वेश्चंस विल अरेंज व्हाट यू आर डूइंग। और दूसरा फायदा है कि दे विल नैरो डाउन योर फोकस ऑन व्हाट यू वांट। सिर्फ एक रिसर्च क्वेश्चन में अक्सर नुकसान ही होता है इफ योर जनरल विजन इज अ बिट कॉम्प्लेक्स, और आपके जो जेहन में आइडिया है कि वो क्वेश्चन फिर बहुत वेग और जनरल बन जाता है। तीन क्वेश्चंस का ये फायदा होता है, आप स्पेसिफिक चीजें लिख सकते हैं, ठीक है ना। इसलिए आमतौर पर 2 या 3 लोग लिखते हैं। When you said that we can even change research questions, so would it change the wording of your original idea of your topic? Yes. Okay. So, if by यहाँ पर you mean by topic you mean the heading, it's possible. Okay. एक चीज इनमें रखें कि टाइटल, वंस आपकी रिसर्च अप्रूव हो जाती है ना, आपका टाइटल नहीं चेंज हो सकता, ठीक है ना। आपके रिसर्च क्वेश्चंस उस टाइटल के अंदर रहते हुए चेंज हो सकते हैं। व्हेन आई से यू कैन चेंज योर रिसर्च क्वेश्चंस, व्हाट आई मीन इज कि आप, जरूरी नहीं है कि एंड तक आपके स्पेसिफिक्स वही रहें। आपका आइडिया वही रहना चाहिए, जनरल एरिया वही रहना चाहिए, ओवरऑल फोकस वही रहना चाहिए, मगर उसमें जो स्पेसिफिक्स हैं वो चेंज हो सकते हैं। सो मिसाल के तौर पे आई मीन जो मेरा टाइटल था, मैं अपनी एग्जांपल इसलिए ले रहा हूँ, बार बार दे रहा हूँ, बिकॉज आई मीन दैट्स द वन आई नो बेस्ट, बिकॉज दैट्स द रिसर्च आई डिड। सो उसकी एग्जांपल मैं आपको ज्यादा अच्छी दे सकता हूँ, ठीक है ना। सो व्हेन आई वाज स्टडिंग, my title was the reinterpretation of Sufism in selected Anglophone novels, a comparative historical study. ऐसा कुछ नाम था, right? Now the thing is, my original research questions were जैसा मैंने बताया था, सबसे पहले में Rumi, दूसरे में शम्स और तीसरे में उनका relationship, right? Because most novels are on Rumi. Since I have found one novel on Hafiz, but like most people don't even know who Hafiz is, so इसलिए I ignored it. तो अब उसके अंदर यह है कि these 3 questions are different from जो मेरे final questions थे, but they get the job done, they're in the same area. So basically over time क्या हुआ है कि as I studied more, as I read more, my vision and my understanding became more specific and more detailed. उस बेस पे उसी चीज को मैं ज्यादा अच्छा फ्रेम कर सका हूँ in a better way, and that's why I can modify my research questions, ठीक है ना। If your research questions demand a complete change of the topic to the point कि आपका title बदल जाएगा, at that point you're conducting a different study, so वहां पर आपको most probably दोबारा से prove करवाना पड़ेगा, ठीक है ना। So when we say कि you can change your research, what it means is कि basically within that frame, that frame, ठीक है ना, how many theories are preferable to be applied? Ideally you shouldn't need to apply theories, मगर ठीक है ना, एक चीज में रखें कि there is a difference between using theories as tools and making the theories the purpose of the study, ठीक है ना। theories are technically जैसा psychoanalysis है, it's basically psychology, ठीक है ना। and that's why मैं अक्सर कहता हूँ कि don't just read Freud and Lacan, यूंग भी पढ़े, एडलर भी पढ़े, और भी जितने भी, लाइक इफ यू आर गोइंग टू डू साइकोलॉजी, डू साइकोलॉजी, ठीक है ना। मगर द पॉइंट इज के थीरीज आर टूल्स, ठीक है ना। द कोर ऑफ द एनालिसिस शुड बी द टेक्स्ट, और जो थीरी है उसको आप अप्लाई नहीं कर रहे। जहां तक ये बात है कितनी आप थीरीज इवोक कर सकते हैं, you can evoke as many theories as you want, as long as number one study novel की उसी text की रहे, उस theory की ना बन जाए, and number two आप जबरदस्ती में ठोस नहीं रहे, ठीक है ना। people have sometimes combined 3-4 theories together to create an interesting idea and use it to look at a novel, ठीक है ना। मगर again फोकस आपका टेक्स्ट पे रहना चाहिए, मेन जो आपका फोकस है, यानी the text should tell you what theory शुड बी इवोक्ड। और उसकी वजह क्या है कि देखें, जब आप एक टेक्स्ट को देखते हैं उस पर 3 चीजें अप्लाई हो रही हैं, ठीक है ना। एक टेक्स्ट, एक आप, बिकॉज यू ब्रिंग योर विजन टू द टेक्स्ट, एंड नंबर 3 इज योर बैकग्राउंड नॉलेज। theories are a part of your background knowledge, ठीक है ना। when you are studying a text, you are trying to study it on the basis of your reaction to the text, and your research into theory is basically you expanding your background knowledge in order to better enhance the way you interact with it. Because of that, again, the main focus should be the text, and your interaction with the text will tell you कि आप किस direction में उसको देखना चाह रहे हैं, और फिर जो जो theory उस डायरेक्शन में आपको उन थीरीज को आप इवोक करेंगे। एक दो हो तो दो हो, एक भी ना हो तो एक भी ना हो। हाँ, मगर ये है कि प्रॉब्ली एक भी ना हो पे मानेंगे नहीं, सो इसलिए आपको प्रॉब्ली एटलीस्ट एक या दो डालनी पड़ेगी, ठीक है ना। ये मेरे केस में हुआ था मेरे साथ के ओरिजिनली आई ट्राइड टू नॉट पुट इन एनी थीरी, बिकॉज मेरा सारा बैकग्राउंड नॉलेज जो मैं वो कर रहा था, इट हैड टू डू बेसिकली विद हिस्ट्री, ठीक है ना। हिस्ट्री थी, बायोग्राफी थी, पोइट्री थी, रूमी की अपनी किताबें थी, उसके बेटे की किताबें थी, शम्स के मलफूजात थे, इस टाइप की थी, ठीक है ना. सो ऑब्वियसली आई डिडंट नीड एनी थ्योरेटिकल फ्रेमवर्क. मुझे आई डिडंट नीड टू कोट एडवर्ड सईद टू से कि जी यहाँ पर कुछ गलत है, बट ऑल आई नीडेड वाज हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियल. मगर कभी कभार ऐसा होता है कि दे स्टिल एक्सपेक्ट यू टू ब्रिंग इन सम थ्योरेटिकल डेटा दैट टेल्स अस कि आज के जमाने से इसकी रेलेवेंस क्या है. सो उस केस के अंदर व्हाट आई डिड वाज आई ब्रॉट इन अ कपल ऑफ रैंड रिपोर्ट को मैंने साइट कर दिया था, एक दो चीजों को मैंने साइट करके, ग्रेगरी लिप्टन की बुक को के आर्टिकल को एक मैंने साइट किया था, ऐसा करके आई शोड कि आजकल की इसकी भी रेलेवेंस है. सो बेसिकली आपकी जो थ्योरी है, इट इज टू थिंग्स. वन, बैकग्राउंड नॉलेज, एंड टू, इट इज आज वाई दिस स्टडी इज रेलेवेंट, ये साबित करने के लिए डिफरेंट डिफरेंट जो राइटर्स हैं उनकी तरफ आपका जो रुजू है वो है, ठीक है ना. सो थ्योरी, अप्लाई इट एंड इवोक इट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ व्हाट यू नीड while interacting with the text, ठीक है ना. Otherwise, ideally, you don't need it. Realistically, you need it. uh, how to be content with your topic. Yeah, so they say that one of the things that every writer has is he always thinks he did not write good enough. Yeah, she did not write good enough. ठीक है ना. So there is no way to actually be content with your topic. I still think like even though I'm pretty satisfied with my MPhil thesis, I still think it could have been better, and everyone knows that feeling. हाँ, इतना जरूर है कि you should make sure कि when you're studying you give your best to it, ताकि आखिर में आप और आपके टीचर या आपके सुपरवाइजर आपको इतना है, आप अपने आप को और वो आपको कह सकें कि देखें यू डिड द बेस्ट यू कुड विद द रिसोर्सेज यू हैड एंड यू डिड अ गुड जॉब, ठीक है ना. जिससे मैंने पीछे कहा था कि टेक्निकली यू कुड लुक फॉर ऑल द रेफरेंसेज टू प्रूव अ पॉइंट, बट यू कांट. सो व्हाट डू यू फाइंड एट लीस्ट टू गुड रेफरेंसेज, एंड इफ यू हैव एक्सेस टू मोर, लाइक कुछ जगहों पे मैंने बहुत ज्यादा साइट की हैं चीजें अपनी स्टडी में, मगर कुछ जगहों पे सिर्फ एक या दो ही मैंने साइट की हैं. If you have at least two good references that are actually good studies, and it's not like आपने कोई 4-5 साल पुरानी study cite की है which is outdated, then um, you're engaging with the thing and it's good enough, ठीक है ना. Sometimes it's not about being the best, it's about being good enough, ठीक है ना, because there is no such thing as a perfectly edited story. I have a poetry teacher. She wrote a poem, edited it, it got published. 2 साल बाद she went back to it. She said, "Okay, this is ridiculous." She edited it again, and then she published another poem. ठीक है ना. So there, so just be good enough, and that's fine.
I think that's all about it. We have just 3 minutes left, and it's not my own stance. It's the Zoom that is asking us to, the remaining meeting time, 3 minutes. And so,
Zoom is like खबरदार ज्यादा पढ़ लिया.
yeah, it's so this way. So the takeaway is theory is to be evoked, not applied, and a lot of, a bundle of takeaways. And let's offer our energetic and warm gratitude to Mr. Munhib Shah. That's so nice of you and so humble of you. It was pleasure to having you here, and we thank you a lot for for helping us and answering our questions. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think the Zoom is again asking me to end this meeting. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Anytime, anytime.